Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 3, the Jubilee Solution. My friend here, Andy Werschke, has been talking to me about this Jubilee Solution for 7 years. I figured it out last night. We've been talking about 7 years, and it wasn't too long ago. I think it was my wife challenged Andy and said, Andy, we get it. There's lots of opposition, a lot of objections that came from me specifically when he first started sharing. And it took a long time to gather and grasp it, but I've got it now, and the message needs to go out to the world. And so he took that challenge and he wrote the book. Let's see the book, Andy.
The book, woohoo, the Jubilee Solution, actually in written form.
Awesome.
Woohoo. Took me 11 years. I hope it's worth it.
Book. Well, we left off last episode 2 discussing what some of the problems, what we're trying to address once again. And the book offers the solution. Can you give us a summary of the 7-step solution?
I will do that happily. The 7 steps, let's just run through them pretty quickly. The whole objective begins with the first step. The whole objective is to get people to recognize our rights. And rights are different from privileges. Obviously, should be obvious that rights aren't privileges. Privileges don't belong to everyone. Rights belong to everyone. And that is actually step number 1 of the 7 steps, is the recognition, the embracing, the securing and defending of the rights of the individuals. It's important to note that that is the highest good. I talk about that in the book. By the way, people aren't lawmakers. There's only one lawmaker. He's the creator. And that's why our founders said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and that they're endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. That's such a crucial thing, and it's central to all these 7 steps. A lot of people talk about the greater good as if there is this thing that's greater good, that's more important than individual rights. But what I propose in the book is that individual rights are the greater good. And if they are secured and defended, then we don't need to look at other greater goods. If there is a greater good, it probably means somebody's rights have already been transgressed somewhere along the line. So the 7 steps of Jubilee, or the Jubilee Solution, are designed to basically establish justice once and for all, and then do it on a revolutionary basis. And you'll see that as we go through the rest of these 7 steps. So step number 1 is rights, and the recognition of rights as the 0 point between doing good and doing evil, and theft as the thing that is unlawful, right?
The opposite?
Theft being the transgression of rights. Basically, to do good is to respect a person and their rights and what belongs to them, and to do evil is to take or withhold that which does not belong to you. And that's true whether it's an individual or a small group of people or a large group of people, including the state. If the state is the one doing the thieving, the state needs to stop. This is the big issue that we don't talk about very much, because the state steals all the time. We've got all kinds of institutionalized theft. And that's what we're going through with these next 6 steps. So the first one, or the second step of the Jubilee Solution, is to develop an American homelands system, to enfranchise all the people, to not have them cut off from the land. People have a right to air, for instance. And if you have a right to air, the same principle that lets you know you have a right to air lets you know you also have a right to the other things that are necessary for you to survive. And a place to park your butt and mount your offensive on the pursuit of happiness is one of those things. So the second step of Jubilee is to establish American homelands. The proposal is to do that by obtaining and setting aside just 10% of the real property that's in the United States. And when we, the people, are disenfranchised and cut off from the land, we've got a problem. So I propose
Can I interrupt you right there? And
sure.
clarify that the establishment of American homelands is ensuring the right to place. Is that where you're getting at?
That is exactly right. Ensuring the right to place, making sure people don't get cut off from the land. Because when you get cut off from the land, you get cut off from your security and you end up being a slave in one shape or form or another. It's much like if somebody said, hey, sure, you have the right to air, but you're going to have to pay me if you want to get some. Well, that's not the right to air. And the same thing is true with land. And I'm not opposed to private property. As you well know, Lee, I've been a realtor for 20 years now, 2 decades of selling real property. Actually, it took me almost a decade to realize we don't sell real property, we just lease it. But that's another topic. If you don't pay your lease fee, your property tax, watch and see what happens. See if you don't get evicted. Um, anyway, step number 2, American homelands. The proposal is to do it on a 20-year land lease and distribute it by an auction format where everybody would receive an equal amount of, we'll call them homeland bucks, right? And that way they can pick and choose the properties that they want. Every taxing authority would set aside 10% of the real property, the parcels in their taxable authority, be it a county or be it a parish or whatever is the taxing body that oversees the property taxes. The homelands property that you receive as a lease for 20 years is non-taxed. It's not a taxable parcel. It's not really designed to be your end all be all. The hope is that people will still continue to buy private property. Then they'll continue to own the private property they own now, unless they don't want it. They would have the option to sell it back to the government and put it in the pool for distribution as a homeland property. All those properties would be zoned mixed use so that people could have access to the markets and be able to do what they need to do on their homeland, and hopefully learn to look out for themselves, not be dependent on government. So that's step number 2, American homelands, connecting people with the land. Step number 3 is the end of fiat money. It's establishing sound money. The problem with fiat money is it's theft, basically. If you give a private group, or even if you give the governing body the ability to just print money out of thin air, it takes away the value of all the money that's already in circulation. And that's a theft. You go to bed one night and that night your government prints out $1 trillion and there was only $3 trillion in circulation. And guess what? It turns out in short order, your money is worth 1/3 less than it was. Your cheeseburger just went from, well, it's $20 now about, so it went from $20 to $30 for a cheeseburger, and it doesn't happen immediately though, so people don't notice it, and or they do finally notice it, and they think, why is a cheeseburger twice as expensive this year as it was 2 years ago? Well, COVID,
Well, why is
actually.
that cheeseburger half the size it was last year?
Right, it shrank in size and it grew in price. What's going on? My bucket got bigger, my bucket of money, but the money in it got smaller. And that's how it happens. It's a silent and unseen theft. And theft is the thing that the government is supposed to be defending us against, not doing to us. So we got to have sound money. And in the book, I propose we use a gold standard. The United States still has the largest gold reserves in the world. Woohoo! Hey, we did one thing right. They're not quite large enough, but we can still use them. And I give a pretty good explanation on how we can do it in the book. But the most important thing is that we establish sound money and we get off the fiat funny money. It's no good. It's not even good for the central bankers, in my opinion. What does it profit a man if you gain the whole world? But be a thief. Don't be a thief. So that's step number 3. So just to review, step number 1, rights as the basis, rights as the 0 point. Step number 2, American homelands, establish enfranchisement. Step number 3, sound money. Step number 4 is a debt cycle. By the way, I took all these right out of the Bible, basically. There have been tons of brilliant men who talked about this for many years, but I just didn't want people to think that I think I'm claiming this as my own idea. I'm not claiming it as my own idea. And I'm not looking to get famous or any of that. Really, what I want is my piece of property, some sound money, a debt cycle. I want the things that this would bring. And I think everybody would want them. So step number 4 is a 7-year debt cycle. A lot of people will think, what, you're just going to forgive the debts every 7 years? Sort of. That's one way to look at it. But really, it would be kind of like admitting that we're bankrupt for the first cycle, right? And all the debts being wiped. So one time there is something that is similar to this great reset that Klaus Schwab and all his cronies are pressing, telling you you're going to own nothing and like it, and it'll be a utopia. I'm not pitching utopia, by the way. I'm under no preconceptions that we're going to create the perfect world. But I do say that the subtitle of the book is "In Order to Form a More Perfect Union." And I believe that's what Americans have been supposed to do since the beginning. We're supposed to just keep making it better, keep making it a more perfect union. So the concept with the debt cycle is that, number one, the borrower is slave to the lender. And we already outlawed slavery a long time ago. But interestingly enough, what we really did, we didn't get rid of slavery. We just broadened it. We made everybody pretty close to equally slaves, unless you're among the elites. If you are really close to that printing press for money, or if you have the printing press for money, or if you're one of the ruling class, so getting rid of slavery, getting rid of debt slavery, but more importantly, converting us from a debt-based, credit-based economic system to a wealth-based economic system, and getting people to have some actual wealth. The objective here is to decentralize the power structure. If you get these power structures where you have a very strong central government or a very strong monopoly or oligarchy or king, what ends up happening is the people suffer. You suffer, I suffer, all the people suffer because they don't have any power. So what you want to do is you want to empower them. How do we empower them? Well, the steps are pretty easy. Number 1, recognize they have rights. Number 2, don't cut them off from the land. Number 3, don't be able to just steal their money easily. Number 4, don't allow them to get trapped in long-term debt cycles. So with step number 4, a 7-year debt cycle, you'll see people getting freed up, and immediately all the people will be freed up and enfranchised and have sound money. From then on out, everybody will understand it's a 7-year debt cycle. If I'm going to loan people money, I'm going to do it based on that 7-year cycle. I'm going to collateralize it. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to get paid. And if I don't get paid, I'm going to keep the collateral. There's nothing wrong with borrowing. There's nothing wrong with lending. It's the long-term debt slavery that becomes the problem. And the way the system is currently set up, that's what you're going to get. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. You know, it's a lot harder for our children to get a home now than it was for our grandparents to get a home or our parents to get a home. And it's going to get even harder unless we change it. There's either going to have to be a violent revolution to change it, or we can put in a peaceful revolution by design. That's the idea behind the Jubilees. They're revolutionary. They reestablish. They bring people back. They give second chances. They
Just to
take a little
clarify,
while.
Andy, when you're talking revolutionary, you're talking revolving, not warfare.
Correct. Well, yeah, that's what I'm
Precisely.
saying. The interesting thing is the way our system is set up. It's going to get more and more centralized power. It's going to get where the central government becomes too strong and the people have no power, and it gets bad, and that leads to a violent war,
Yeah,
revolution.
yeah, we don't want to go there.
And
All
we
right, so
don't, right? We
you've
don't want
got
to
the
go
flop,
there.
you've got the turn, take us to the river and to the end.
Okay, so that's step 4. Step 5 is no forced taxation, no forced tribute. Like I said to you earlier, you know, if I were to come and steal your wallet, that would be theft. If I got some buddies together and we all came and we stole your wallet, that would be theft. If 150 million of us got together and came and stole your wallet, it's still theft. Even if we call it taxation and not theft, it's still theft. The point is, the government's supposed to be defending us from thefts. If the government starts stealing from us, they've become the problem, not the solution. So we need to end the forced taxation and set up a voluntary tax system. That may sound crazy to people. No, I'm not going to pay taxes if they're voluntary. Yep, correct. If you don't want to pay taxes, you shouldn't have to pay taxes. You're free. Free people get to do whatever they want to do, as long as they don't transgress the rights of other people. That's the limit, right? Otherwise, you can't tell people who are free what to do. You're not their boss. You also can't just steal their money. But for some reason, there's a what was the word I used when we were talking yesterday? It's where your thoughts don't align with your actions. Cognitive dissonance. Yeah. The psychiatrists and their associations try to redefine it, but interestingly enough, I think that there is a societal cognitive dissonance, and the taxation question is one of those. They just don't compute it. It's been going on so long. There's always been tribute. You always got to pay the tribute. If it's the mafia, you don't pay the tribute, or you do, right? But we're supposed to stand up against the mafia as a group and say, no, we're not paying your tribute. We're going to stand. We're going to be strong. We're armed. We can defend ourselves. And that's why there's a lot of people in government don't want you to be armed, don't want you to be able to defend yourself. Those are the collectivists. They want to take your money. They want to take the power. They want to have control. They want you to do what they want you to do. They don't want you to be free. Also covered in the book, collectivism versus individualism and distributism. Some good stuff in there about that. So step 5, no forced taxation. So the question comes up, well, how do you get money? How does the government run? There's lots of good ways for the government to run. One of the things I mentioned is the gas tax is a good tax. The gas tax, if you don't want to pay it, don't buy gas, right? If you don't want to use the roads, don't buy gas. You want to buy an electric car and not have to buy gas? Well, you'll still be paying the gas tax because that's how we make the electric still. But that's another different case in point. But the gas tax is good. We need roads. Everybody knows it. It's one of the biggest things we need government for. The gas tax actually covers the roads. Believe it or not, if you add up the federal, state, and local gas tax levels, they more than cover the streets already. We could rebuild them all every 8 years with the money that we bring in from the gas tax alone. It's a good kind of tax, right? So that's the idea behind all the taxes. We need to shrink the federal government. We need to get rid of all the entitlement programs and this giant beast that is the federal government. We don't need most of it. What we need is enfranchisement, sound money, no theft, debt cycles. With those things, we don't need all the other programs. So we give the federal government tariffs on imports alone. That's it. That's all they get, tariffs, excise taxes. Then the market basically will determine the size and scope of the federal government, the market itself. Because if we need stuff, we'll need that we can't get here, we'll need to bring it in. If they tax it too high, it won't get purchased, right? So they'll only be able to tax it so much because if it doesn't get purchased, they can't bring it in. So that's a nice check and balance against the size and scope of the federal government right there. State governments would continue to be able to do lotteries if they choose and sales taxes if they choose. Both of those, if you don't want to buy a lottery ticket, don't buy a lottery ticket. Nobody cares. If you want to buy a lottery ticket, great. We need the money. It's it's good. Sales taxes. If you're debt free, you're enfranchised. You've got the ability to access the market. You've got nobody stealing your money. No institutionalized theft anymore. You can learn to be self-reliant. If you learn to be self-reliant, that will be a benefit to us, right? We can learn from you. If you learn to be self-reliant, you don't want to buy anything. You don't even want to go out and buy a coffee because you don't want to pay tax. Okay, great. Learn to make your own coffee, grow your own coffee. The fact is, though, people are still going to buy stuff. We need to buy stuff. It's great. And sales taxes are fine. And sales taxes will vary from state to state. And people will be able to choose what state they live in, because every 21st year they're going to get a new place to live if they want it. And if they want to stay, they can stay. They're free. You love free. So step 5, no forced taxation. The local governments, by the way, will continue to get their revenue from property tax on the 90% of property that's not Homeland's property. They'll continue to do that. It's also a great way for them to regulate the rest of the means of production, the bundle of rights that comes with personal private property. Private property values, their taxation is basically based on their value. If there are minerals in the land, if there's oil in the land or water that they're taking out of the land, things like that, that can be easily handled at the local level and benefit the local people by merely recognizing the value of the properties, right? And it's a beautiful way to do it. Love it when we can find simple ways, and that's a simple way. So that's step number 5, no forced taxation. Step number 6 is militia, not military. This is the Second Amendment connection to the Jubilee solution. Second Amendment reads, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. A well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of the free state. That's really well written. A well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of the free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. We need to expand on the concept of the militia in the United States. We need to get away from using our military as a bargaining chip and a bully system in the world scope. We need to be friends to our trading partners. We need to be allied potentially with other countries that support our interests. But we need to be bedfellows of none, and we need to be defensively postured, not offensively postured. Nobody likes a bully. The United States is currently policing the world, but not being paid for it. Our corporations seem to be gaining benefits from it oftentimes, or maybe they're intranational corporations. I would argue that they are more so that. The companies that really benefit from the United States police actions and our war activities overseas, they don't care about America. Not really. They're not American companies. BlackRock is not an American company, even though they're based in America. They're mysteriously the only company that can do business freely in China. Do your own research on that one. Not mentioned in the book, but remember the book. That's step 6, militia, not military. Basically, bring the troops home, liquidate the bases if it's necessary and if it's beneficial to us. Maintain our military, which is 8 times stronger than the rest of the world's military, but move it to a militia standpoint. Make it a defensive thing. Bring the Navy home. All the states that have coastline, they get Navy, right? And increase the Coast Guard, right? Also, increase the sheriff's departments. Basically, allow people to serve voluntarily as sheriff's posse members. Allow them to serve in the National Guard. Expand on that whole concept. I even envision communities having war games against other communities, getting competitive about that. Maybe even as competitive as we are about competitive sports. I could see that. I could see cities going against cities and towns going against towns and rivalries, but also recognizing that they've all got to work together. Make our military force a smaller force, right? You're going to have some people who are still full-time military. Somebody's got to oversee the nukes. Somebody's got to oversee the jets and the aircraft carriers and things of that nature. There's still going to be a fair amount of people who are full-time military personnel that are paid military. But much bigger force is the militia and should be the militia. We should be prepared to defend our own streets. We should be prepared to defend against all enemies. We need to stay strong, and we need to put the world on notice. We need to tell them, look, we've been the police force for long enough, and I think most of you don't like it. We're going to a defensive posturing. Don't mess with us. We'll still blow you up. But we're going to trade. We just want to trade and be friends. we're like Switzerland with nukes and everybody's well trained. So that's step 6, militia, not military. Finally,
That's
step,
super interesting, Andy.
yeah,
I think you've hit a lot of key points. Bring it home, number 7.
number 7. Number 7 is very simple. Stop government borrowing. No more government borrowing. If you can't pay for it, you don't get it. If we really need it, you're going to have to look to the private sector. There's going to be a lot of wealthy people now. People are going to be amazed at what happens when you go out and sound money. The government stops stealing from you. You got everybody enfranchised and able. You don't have to provide all these social programs. It will be like nothing anybody's ever seen. It'll be the greatest country that ever has been if we would just do these 7 steps. And the neat thing is it was all already paved for us. The foundation is already there. Sadly, we didn't get on it at the beginning, right? We had some black marks on our record, no pun intended. We had enslavement. We didn't treat the Native Americans very well. We did a lot of things that we should have done, but we have also recognized our errors. We were a young nation, right? And there was cognitive dissonance that's built in from societal stuff. All those guys who founded this nation came out of a nation of kings. They were only used to kings and the rule of law for the kings and rule of law for the commoners. Sadly, we never did fix our law system, and that's something that we need to do. That's all part of step number 1, recognizing rights. There's a lot to that, but that's the gist of it. That's the 7 steps that I think we
I'm glad you
do.
said that that's not a utopia, but it sure sounds good. And
It's
I hope the audience is listening and getting excited about this too. And I'm sure, as I did over the last 6 years, you have lots of questions. How's this going to work? How does this make sense? Explain to me some more details. Andy, where do they get the details?
They can get them right here. They can get the book. A lot of the questions will be answered in that. Keep in mind, this is a democratic republic. It may not work out all the things that I'm proposing may not work out the way I think they will. There might be some things that we didn't see coming. There usually are. That's why we have a democratic process. That's why we vote. But interestingly enough, rights are always there. That there is you can't just decide democratically, oh, we're going to kill all the Democrats or we're going to kill all the Republicans because there's more of us than there are of them. And if we just killed them all, it'll be fine. No, they have rights. We don't work like that. There's a rule of law and it's a highest law and it comes down from above, just like all authority comes down from above.
I think that's a great place. We're going to ask some questions. We're going to get into a few of those details to what's your appetite for the book here in just a moment.
Sounds great.